Okay, let's see if I can put the chat on the screen today. Discord chat. Hopefully that'll update. I don't know. We're creating a new project. Prince of Persia. Hello, Chris. Sands of Time. Let's just say Sands of Time. Keep it simple. Stop it. Stop it. Thank you. Boink. Boink. We will go to 30 frames per second. And good. Good, good, good. G2G. All right, let's load in. Don't need that anymore. Delete. Don't need that. Delete. Let's go and grab our stuff. Most importantly, we need the audio. There it is. We need the gameplay footage. There we go. And while those conform, let's also grab the music. It's on this one. Prince of Persia. End of Time. That's the track list. Import folder. Don't need the zip. That's fine. Okay. Now we just gotta wait for all that to conform down there in the bottom right corner. Probably can't see it because the chat is covering it, but it's that yellow bar that fills up right here. And once it's all conformed, we can get started for real. Boop, 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 boop. I've been feeling a little bit of the not feeling motivated to be creatively productive lately. I know you've dealt with that from time to time. Yeah, I'm in the middle of it real bad and have been for probably the last 6 or 7 months. I was thinking about what I'm going to say in my monthly Patreon upload. And, like, part of me, I still need to talk to my boss first, I think, because he's also a partner on the channel. So, he's allowed me to have a space here in the building and stuff to, like, do my work on this because he's invested in it as well, on top of, like, doing the work I do for him. And balancing those two things, plus just, like, a work-life overall balance. I don't know. I'm trying to decide how much of that anyone cares to hear. Like, if it's just going to sound like I'm complaining, because I definitely don't want to do that. Like, I think a lot of people would see my position in life as envious, right? I don't want to come off as if I think that my problems are, like, so overwhelming that, like I'm having this hard time when there are people who, are out there really struggling. I've always struggled with that. Just like anything that I feel like I'm going through, it's like, like it's not that bad. I shouldn't complain. I shouldn't feel this way because my situation's not nearly as bad as it could be. I've always struggled with allowing myself or having guilt for feeling like I'm not happy with how things are. And the deal is, though, that I have been working in the range of 65 to 80, sometimes a little more than that, hours per week since I was 19 years old. I served a mission for the Mormon Church. I was Mormon growing up, and I'm not religious now, but I served a Mormon mission where the schedule was basically you wake up at 6 o'clock, you eat breakfast, you do personal study, and then study with your companion until 9 o'clock. And then you go out and you work until lunch, which was half an hour. And then you go out and work until dinner, which could be anywhere, because usually we had dinner with like families in the ward. Then you work until 9 p.m. You come inside, you plan with your companion for the next hour, and go to bed at 10 o'clock. That was every single day for 2 years, except for Thursdays, which was P Day. Preparation Day is what that stands for, which was mostly meant to run errands, do laundry, buy groceries for the next week. It was very much like military service. Do anything that is necessary so that you'll be prepared for the oncoming week. And if there were or email your families, because you can't call them, you can't have any contact with them except twice a year on Mother's Day and Christmas. But you could email them. And if there's any time left over, you could meet up with some other missionaries to play basketball or, do some recreation. But you can't watch movies. You can't play games. You can't listen to music outside of the approved, like, religious library that they had. But you could do physical activities. You could, hang around and chill and talk. We had a D&D session that we did for a couple of transfers. But anyways, that was my schedule for those 2 years. As soon as I came back from that, when I was 21, I was struggling to find work because the recession was at its peak at that time. But I eventually moved to Denver, and then I was working 3 jobs for a while where I was working 80 hours a week. And at that time, it was all about, I'm trying to save money for college. I don't want to go into debt to go to college. So I was working like crazy and saved a decent amount of money, not nearly enough to pay for 4 years of college, but enough to get me through the first couple semesters without having to, take a loan. But, I was young. I had a lot of energy. Like, it was fine. And, I went to college while I also started a business with Landon and Kaysen. So I was working and going to school simultaneously, still basically working 80 hours a week. Then our YouTube stuff hit it off. We started doing that full time, and we were doing weekly releases. That back then we were staying up, basically pulling all-nighters every single week before the day of release to get those videos done. I was probably working close to 100 hours a week for a while there. Then, that didn't really work out. On the side of that, though, I was doing all this gaming stuff, too. I was the only one doing that. They didn't participate in the gaming channel. Then we decided to switch focus onto the gaming channel, and I've been working full-time while also doing this. My whole point is that I've worked this kind of rigorous schedule that has almost entirely ruined my work-life balance. And it's taking its toll mentally on me right now. I have had a couple of episodes over the last month that could maybe be described as, they were mental breakdowns. Like, I was on the edge of deleting the YouTube channel. Like, that's how far gone my state of mind was in. Like, without consulting with the other people who are in it, and just like getting on a plane and going away and disappearing. Like, I was freaking losing my mind. I'm so stressed because there are so many things I don't like, the other part of it too is that, like, my friends, I I've I have this thing where most of my friends are basically just my I'm basically like a psychiatrist to them, or a psychologist. They just come to me because they're going through something hard and they want advice and they want to be nurtured and, told everything's going to be okay. I don't have a lot of friendships, like close friendships, where I feel like I can share my own stuff, if that makes sense. So I am in a situation where I've got to make some changes, but I also don't want to be unfair to the people who have supported us on Patreon for so long. Like, I feel like I probably need to cut streaming out altogether. That's the easiest thing for me to do as a measure of stepping back and taking some more time for self-care and for the people in my life. And that would be easy enough to do. I've already kind of started doing that anyways. But and by streaming, I don't mean this. This is me working on a video. I'm going to do that anyways. So having you guys here while I work on it, it's totally up to you if you want to watch. That's fine. That will continue. But I feel like doing all like the daily Twitch streams and the Final Fantasy Friday streams, it's just such a huge measure of preparation and time that I don't have for my family. My dad had a stroke this week, and he's gonna be okay. There's nothing that should like permanently be a gigantic issue, but it was in relation to a heart attack he had 10 years ago, where he's not getting enough blood pumping to the brain. He needs to be on blood thinners, but he had stopped taking them for a while because he had to have a surgery, and you can't be on blood thinners when you have a surgery. So I kind of realized, like, I have not spent like almost any time with my family, who live literally 10 minutes away from me. I still see them maybe like 4 or 5 times a year. Birthdays, holidays, things of that nature. I don't see them because I work every day of the week. And so I don't know. I've had this mounting pressure for so long that has, like I said, it was just a couple weeks ago. I think it might have been last week, where my mind was in such a state to where I thought the reasonable action was to delete myself from social media, to delete myself from the public eye, to delete the YouTube channel, to get on a plane and go somewhere else and like start a life and try to disappear. Like, obviously that's insane, like, but that's where my mind was at. And I mean, I've already been taking steps back, not even just from as a choice, but because I'm just so tired. Like, I haven't been doing the daily streams. I haven't been doing this stream right here where I work on a video every day. And I've got to, I think, take many, many steps back in terms of how much I'm doing. Because that's my tendency. When things aren't going exactly the way I want, we're not growing fast enough, I'm not happy with the results, my tendency is to, okay, we got to do more. We got to really dig in. We got to do more. We got to, let's get Twitch going. Let's do more here. Let's do more here. And, but, my relationships have really suffered from it. Chrissy and I were in a really hard place for a while. We're doing much better now, but we were broken up for a number of months there because, I think largely because she wasn't feeling like she was a priority, and it caused her to do some things that were very hurtful to me. I won't get into details, but anyways, been thinking about my future as far as that goes, and how much time will have to be dedicated to a family life if we were to move forward together in our lives. And I don't know, like I said, I still need to talk to my boss about it, But I don't know how much of this is something that would be worth sharing, like in a monthly Patreon video, to describe to people, like, look, I'm sorry that I don't always, every single week, get the Patreon questions up. I'm sorry that, like, I don't do the monthly Patreon video every month. Sometimes I miss it. Like, sometimes, I'm not as active, I feel, on Patreon as I should be. A lot of people have dropped off on Patreon feeling like they were dissatisfied, and I get it. I mean, the problem is that I'm making too many promises because I can't do this all myself, and I've been basically doing it all myself. This isn't a knock on Kaysen, but Kaysen shows up for the podcast to appear on it, and he works on his own videos. That's it. Everything else, in terms of everything that goes on behind the scenes of the channel, I do. So, you can look at that two ways. One, you can look at it, oh, he should be helping you more, or you can look at it as he's trying to maintain a work-life balance and I'm trying to do way too much. So I'm trying to find a way to get motivated again, because I haven't been. I think you guys have probably seen it over the years, my level of frustration, my lashing out while I'm playing games, these outbursts of anger and stuff. Like, I think it's just been a mounting pressure for years that I've kind of brought on myself by saying I'm just going to dig my heels in and work as hard as possible until I reach my ambitions. But I think that I've been working harder than I have been working smarter, if that makes sense. And I need to find a way to please Patreon, to please the people who are subscribed to the channel, and also maintain a life balance that's healthy, where I can spend time with the people that are close to me and that I love, and find time for self-care and for relaxation and recharging, because I'm very much an introvert, and introverts need time alone to recharge, and I don't get a lot of that. So, anyways, like I said, I've always struggled with the concept of, like, what am I complaining about? I have 100,000 subscribers. People would kill for that. I have multiple sources of income. I'm not in debt. Like, I haven't had a family member die. I haven't, struggled with any kind of terminal disease. I have my health. I live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. I have access to clean water and food, and I have, shelter. It's tough for me to say, like, to share this stuff, because I feel like it's so trivial in comparison to the problems other people have. I've had people even come onto my Chrono Trigger video and try and call me out on that, Oh, you think that was a big issue? You think that was painful? Like, I've been through blah, 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 blah. And not to say that that's a valid way to approach it either. I mean, it's freaking horrible to go to somebody and be like, play the victimhood Olympics, if you will. But I don't know. I just need to do something to fix this balance in my life. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to continue to do this much longer. So, anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to say in the Patreon video, but I don't want to say it until I know what the resolution is, like what I'm going to actually do about it. I think I need to talk to my boss first and let him know, like, I need to, like, have okay, here's the problem, and here's what's done to me. Here's what I'm doing as a solution, and here's the new Patreon structure. Here's what I'm doing for rewards now, right? And make it more about, if you like us and you want to support us, that's what Patreon's for. It's not about receiving some reward. The reward is the videos themselves. saying that in a better way. I haven't really worked through how to do that yet. I mean, I still obviously will allow the $10 level to sit in on these sessions, to have double voting power. Those are things that don't take any extra effort on my part. But I think anything in addition to that, like, I just don't have the time or the energy anymore to try and like do by myself. And so anyways, long story short, we're still waiting for these videos to conform here. that's that's where I'm at. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying here. I haven't been looking. Is it really a mission? It seems to always be the mission. One day racing chocobos and another defending a condor does not seem like the kind of variety you'd get mission wise. You're talking about like the Mormon mission that I served. Yeah, it's. I've learned over the years how problematic a lot of the philosophy of the church is, and the way that they treat young people, and the way that they guilt people into work and tithing and all kinds of things. I'm not religious anymore. I left the church a while ago, but I was really into it at the time. I really believed in it, and I was doing it for not just because it was because I felt like I was obligated to, but because I felt like I was expressing my sort of admiration, respect, and love for God. But anyways, that's a whole nother lifetime for me, right? I don't think people would be upset if you took a sabbatical or something like that. Family's more important than disappointing your fans. Way more important. You need to do what's best for you. Everyone has varying degrees of difficulty in life. No one has it easy all the time. There are ups and downs. I patronize a Patreon guy who charges $1 per podcast, so that could be a model. Oh, that's an interesting idea. First thing you can do, Mike, is not read YouTube comments anymore. For the most part, I don't. For the most part, I don't. I try to be active as much as I can be, at least with the first people who watch, because those are usually the most avid fans, the ones who care the most, and the ones who have the best criticism. Because it's one thing to try to stay away from comments because they're filled with trolls, people who are trying to put you down and not give constructive criticism, and that's definitely something to avoid, because you can get so caught up in that it could just ruin you, especially if you don't have thick skin like me. I have terribly thin skin, but in addition to that, I do think it's important to allow yourself to be challenged by those who do want to see you become better, because otherwise you'll stunt your own growth. So there needs to be a balance found there, but I mean, in the pursuit of only trying to look at the stuff that comes from the real people who care. Hold on, this is actually my boss calling. I'm going to mute myself for a second. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. I'm back. It's related to a client we're currently working with. They're asking for more than what we agreed to in our initial contract, so we're working out how to tell them no. Oz says, I see your comments on other videos like Eye Patch Wolf's FF15 stuff. Oh, really? I don't remember watching that. Have I seen Eye Patch Wolf? Anyways, yeah, I comment on some other channels. I often comment on Film Score Fanfare. I've left comments on Dreamcast Guys videos a couple times, Lore Runners videos a couple times. So I get around a little bit. Love you too, Tom. You're a beast. Rob says my cousin Saskia was excommunicated from the Mormons because she's gay. Yep. That's what they do. All right, we've got all of our stuff loaded in. Let's just see where we get from here. Do you have a stress ball on your desk where you work? Having a bad day, it helps me to vent. I don't. Maybe I should look into getting one. Let's take a listen to some of the music here. Most of this is fight music. It is battle music. The Father. The Zoo. This is a pretty good opening. This is a good possibility as a starter piece of music to show a little montage and then like get into the review. This is a possibility. It could work. Not that one. Nope. I really like that one. This is one of my favorites for battles. Definitely not. That one is a possibility for an intro. I think I like the Zoo a little better, but... That one has a nice, smooth transition. It could be used to transition from one song to the next, but I don't think it should be the intro. This one should definitely be used somewhere during the dev history section. It says, I don't mean to bring the mood down, but it is understandably concerning with the Patreon status now after seeing it peak with that Appreciate My Work video. At the least, we here will back you. We'll back you still even if you hide in Italy. Yeah, and I don't blame people for dropping off on Patreon. I blame myself. Obviously, I'm not doing enough to keep those people in. Now, a lot of it is just people run into, a hard time financially. It's like, I can't afford this right now. My financial situation changed. There's an exit survey people take when they leave Patreon, when they stop supporting somebody. And usually people say, my financial situation changed, right? So you can't blame people for that. But really, like, if I was doing something compelling enough, people would find a way to keep supporting it. So obviously, I need to do something different. I need to be better if I want to keep those people engaged. And on top of that, it's been a long time since we really pushed it on the channel. We probably need to reintroduce it again. The problem is that I don't want to reintroduce it unless I've really nailed down what the structure of the Patreon reward tiers are going to be in order to keep my work-life balance that I was talking about earlier. So I need to have a talk with my boss, figure out what is going to be reasonable, and then find a tier structure that will work, and then announce it again. And I think it'll go up from there when we announce it again. But, success and failures on the people creating, not on the people supporting. You got to make something that they want or that they value. And if they don't value it, it's because you're not doing something right. So it's a learning process. Okay, that's a battle. Games like not a ton of range in as far as choices for what we can do, but I think I'm decided on the zoo as the opener. Just for now, I'll make the decision that that's the point where I'll come in. Arbitrarily. It says, perhaps we can pool ideas after this review. I'd be happy for that. If you guys, want to, be very helpful to know what the patrons would appreciate to have. And, finding a way to balance what I need with what you guys will find exciting. I think that would be a really good idea. Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared from the mainstream AAA industry. The once thriving linear action-adventure puzzle platform genre has pretty much been replaced by the free-roam open-world action game. I think this could actually be like a touch louder, to be honest, at the beginning. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. That's what I meant to do. It goes too fast. It needs to be over here somewhere. Games like this can be over quite a bit. The freak? Why isn't it moving? Doesn't make any sense at all. Move over. Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared from the mainstream AAA industry. The once thriving linear action-adventure puzzle platform genre has pretty much been replaced by the free-roam open-world action game, with RPG elements sprinkled on top. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with the latter format. I've certainly enjoyed my fair share of games structured that way. But this shift sort of represents the embracing of a design philosophy which amplifies an inherent obstacle in game development and plagues every project I've ever read about. Scope and ambition almost always outweigh what can be reasonably accomplished in a sensible time frame. This problem requires visionary direction and management, which recognizes the core principles driving the experience in order to make the right decisions on how to scale back and cut what isn't necessary. Yannis Mallah and Patrice Delissette's, producer and creative director on The Sands of Time respectively, clearly understood how to do this without sacrificing the project's soul. When we talk about games, usually we spend a lot of time discussing either the artistic, thematic qualities or the nuts and bolts mechanics of gameplay and whether it all amounts to something fun to play. What other major AAA action or AAA titles would be in the same genre as Prince of Persia? I look back to games like God of War before it's changed to the new one that came out last year. God of War was very similar on the PS2. I would say, to some degree, what is it? Devil May Cry, Soul Reaver, even the Tomb Raider games, like back in the day, were very much kind of structured the same way. Those are the types of games that I would kind of like put all into the same box. It makes sense because presentation and how we interact with games are what make them memorable and enduring for us. Rarely, however, do we discuss project management, unless it's in a... Yeah, Banjo-Kazooie is another, those kind of 3D platformers. What was the other Ubisoft game that came out at a similar time? Beyond Good and Evil. There's, I think, a number of them that you can kind of put into the same category. The negative light when we feel disappointed by something we've been looking forward to. For instance, if we take a game that's Sly is a good example, definitely awesome. Widely praised. We'll often hear about great art design, engaging combat, thoughtful writing, beautiful music, or stellar level design. All of this work is visible to us, so it's reasonable that those are the things that get us excited to analyze and discuss. The Sands of Time excels in all of these areas, but it's evident to me that it was the behind-the-scenes work, the management decisions and leadership that are invisible to us, that brought such great talent together and made something that feels truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's development was without its problems. I'm starting to wonder if there's a way to bring... that feels truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's development was without its problems, or that management didn't make a lot of mistakes along the way. To me, good then it just starts. Okay. Something that feels truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's... I want to end it on that. There's, I think what I maybe could do is push this back a little bit. Oh, wait a minute. This is what I want. Made something that feels truly inspired. I need to work on that to try to put some kind of reverb on it. And it hangs on that. Boom. We give it like a moment. So that it kind of hangs for a second, and then we transition to the next music. So that's something I'll have to work on in Audition later. But that's the thought. Truly inspired. Yeah, I think maybe 3D Mario platformers and Banjo-Kazooie are more platform-based, certainly, than linear puzzle-based. But God of War is a great direct comparison. And I would think Soul Reaver is a pretty good direct comparison. I haven't played too much of Beyond Good and Evil, but I would think that that's pretty close. And Sly, I think, has some puzzle solving in it. Maybe like Jak and Daxter. The Legend of Zelda is more focused on the on the puzzle solving than it is on the platforming. It doesn't really have much platforming, so that's not quite it. But I'm sure we could find some examples of others. They're just not coming to me off the top of my head. But I think God of War, for sure, is a great direct comparison. That Castlevania game, the newer one. Castlevania, what was it called? Oh, and Devil May Cry as well. Castlevania series. That's a TV series. That's not what I want. Castlevania games. The one that came out in like 2008. Or Lords of Shadow, 2010. Castlevania Lords of Shadow was designed pretty much that way. Yeah, that's what I would say. That's cool. I've been looking for genres that need to make a comeback. ActRaiser would be a genre that needs a comeback if there's ever been another RPG game like it. Yeah, ActRaiser was freaking really unique. I would love to see more games like that.
Inspired.
Oh, Star Wars Sims? Holy crap, we need another Rogue Squadron. I can't even... Or X-Wing versus TIE Fighter.
Truly inspired. Now this...
Somewhere like around there, maybe.
Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's development was without its problems, or...
So what should we do?
Now, this isn't to say...
Holy effing fetch, that is loud.
...was truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's development was without its problems, or that management didn't make a lot of mistakes along the way. To me, good management isn't about completely eliminating obstacles or having the perfect foresight to sidestep every potential blunder. Rather, it's about efficient problem solving and how the vision of the project can be best achieved even under less than ideal circumstances. After looking into the process for how this game was made, it seems unquestionable that the creative leadership had that kind of prowess. Prince of Persia, of course, didn't get its start.
Okay, too much of a pause there. Bring it closer.
Had that kind of prowess. Prince of Persia, of course, that kind of prowess. Prince of Persia, of course,
just a little bit more.
Of prowess. Prince of Persia, of course.
That sounds pretty good.
Prowess. Prince of Persia, of course, didn't get its start within Ubisoft in the early 2000s, but stood long before that as a classic IP created in 1989 by Jordan Mechner and published by Broderbund. Though it got off to a slow start, it became well beloved for how it captured the spirit of classic adventure films, but most especially for its incredibly fluid animation quality, which Mechner achieved by rotoscoping the movements of his family and friends. After taking a break from game design to enroll in film school, he returned as a freelance creative advisor to help Broderbund produce a sequel, which was met with critical and commercial success. However, after Broderbund and its assets were sold in a disastrous set of acquisitions involving a number of companies, the 1999 follow-up, Prince of Persia 3D, struggled on both fronts, mostly because the developers weren't given time to apply the level of polish the series had become known for. Mechner, having suffered through 2 commercial disappointments during this time, was understandably ready to move on from the industry. Eventually, the Prince of Persia catalog was sold to Ubisoft, but the IP still belonged to Mechner, and because of this, producer Janis Mala knew he would have to present an excellent mock-up, something that would accurately demonstrate the vision of excellence he was striving for, if he was to convince Mechner to allow Ubisoft to move forward. Working closely with a core team of 7, they began laying down the foundation for what would become the Sands of Time, demonstrating most importantly a sharp change of direction from Prince of Persia 3D while maintaining the spirit of the franchise, which had always been rooted in the tone of classic adventure stories with industry-leading, state-of-the-art animation. Their work spoke for itself, and Mechner was duly impressed. He not only gave Ubisoft license to proceed with the project, but eventually came on board himself to write the story and serve as a lead designer. Thus, the...
Oh man, Chris, that sounds both like a really great read and terrible at the same time, but something definitely worth reading and knowing about. I always love to hear the stories of the devs. That would be a good book to get. What is it called? Because that might be the kind of thing that I might want to make videos out of, getting in touch with some of those people.
The project got off on the right foot. It had a talented and passionate core team who were excited about doing something that hadn't been tried before, strong management with good heads on their shoulders, and both the blessing and cooperation of the original creator. Even so, as it is with all large-scale game development, there were a number of bumps in the road. Jordan Mechner describes some of the difficulties in crafting the story in an essay submitted to the Electronic Book Review. In it, he talks about the do's and don'ts of video game storytelling and admits that the first script they were devising didn't support the core gameplay concepts, relying too much on exposition-heavy cutscenes and telling a story that had little to do with what the player would spend his or her time doing while playing. In other words, he felt the story contained a lot of ludonarrative dissonance. Pop's core gameplay is very simple. There's only one playable character. The gameplay is a combination of acrobatic exploration, getting from point A to point B, and combat, killing everyone you meet. Plus, one cool original feature. You can turn back time to undo your mistakes. The challenge for the writer is to invent a story that will fit this gameplay, making the most of its strengths without highlighting its limitations. At first, the team started with a great title and core concept, The Sands of Time. Unfortunately, the first pass at that game script succumbed to many of the don'ts listed above.
What in the balls?
The Sands of Time. Unfortunately, the first pass at that game script succumbed to many of the don'ts listed above. It had a... The Sands of Time. Unfortunately, the first pass at that game script succumbed to many of the don'ts listed above. The don'ts listed above. It had a...
Okay, this needs to...
Don'ts.
Needs to not fade.
Succumbed to many of the don'ts listed above. Many of the don'ts listed above.
Okay, that's too much.
To many of the don'ts listed above.
That's close. That's very close.
Listed above. Don'ts listed above.
I think I need to do it this way.
To many of the don'ts listed above. It had a prolific script succumb to many of the don'ts listed above.
Like one frame up from there. Oops.
The Sands of Time. Unfortunately, the first pass at that game script succumbed to many of the don'ts listed above. It had a proliferation of characters representing various political factions, a hero whose goal wasn't always clear.
He says it's called Gamers at Work. It's got Nolan Bushnell from Atari, Trip Hawkins from EA. Man, that's depressing hearing about how EA started as a dev shop for artist devs. Ken Williams from Sierra Online, Wild Bill Steely, who was Sid Meier's business partner, Fergus Urquhart, maybe, from Obsidian, Warren Spector. Oh man, Warren Spector. I have so much respect for that dude. He's had such a hard time. Doug and Gary Carlston from Broderbund, and a bunch of others. Holy crap, dude.
And long exposition-burdened dialogue scenes. Making the decision to scrap the existing storyline and start fresh from the Sands of Time concept gave the team the freedom to create a new story that would yield more bang for the buck. We took our new direction from the core features of the gameplay itself: unity of time and place, acrobatics, combat, and rewind. The rewind feature in particular is what makes the Sands of Time stand out from any of its contemporaries in the genre. The idea was devised by director Patrice de Lesseps, who, while working on one of Ubisoft's previous games, Donald Duck, many of the don'ts listed above. It had a proliferation of characters representing various political factions, a hero whose goal wasn't always clear, and long exposition-burdened dialogue scenes. Making the decision to scrap the existing storyline and start fresh from the Sands of Time concept gave the team the freedom to create a new story that would yield more bang for the buck. We took our new direction from the core features of the gameplay itself: unity of time and place, acrobatics, combat, and rewind. The rewind feature in particular is what makes the Sands of Time stand out from any of its contemporaries in the genre. The idea was devised by director Patrice de Lesseps, who, while working on one of Ubisoft's previous games, Donald Duck Going Quackers, would become fatigued each time he failed a platforming section and would have to start the level over. Instead, he thought it would be faster and more fun to allow the player to rewind the time and try the sequence again. This feature ended up becoming a staple of the game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together. In a post-mortem written by Mala in 2004, he detailed the most difficult struggle of the game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together.
I think I might have to do something similar here. There's a nice little symbol rise.
Gameplay and the story together.
But it needs to hold, you know.
Story together. The story together. Gameplay and the story together.
There's a couple ways I can do that. I can put my own symbol rise in there to sort of supplement it. But I think that'll be a good place to transition to a new piece of music. I could maybe do the same thing here, right? In fact, I think that would be better. Yeah. Let's see if I can actually locate a good symbol rise in my libraries here. That's the wrong one. This is the one. Sound effects, libraries. So I think, actually, maybe rather than finding it here, I could find it in my music folder under audio machine. Tools of the trade. Nope. Maybe it's Atomic Music Station. Here we go. Transitions. Let's try the transitions first, then we'll try the rises after that, or maybe swish hits. Next Resident Arc review, Donald Duck Going Quackers. That's when we nail the audience over the head with the Patreon revamp. Totally. Nope. Too intense. Don't like it. Nope. Nope. Just a simple symbol rise will do. I don't think these are symbol rises, though. That one's cool. That could work for something. These are all very dramatic. like Seafoam, and I like Piano Man, but not for this. Okay. Transition's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for rise, I think. These should be cymbal rises, right? Are these going to be choral rises? Probably choral rises. Swish hits. Could also be one of the other CDs. Ambient scapes. These are just like full percussions, I think. Well, let's see what the rises are. I think these are mostly choral rises, though. Yeah. Choral and orchestral rises. I just want a cymbal. Maybe I'm thinking of a different library than this. Yeah, I think I am. Trailer X. These are trailer music. It's not from here then. Maybe it's in the Video Copilot folder. Video Copilot. No, but that's the visual effects stuff. It's got to be in the sound effects. What the fetch? Oh, here. Sound effects, Video Copilot. Where are you, Video Copilot? There. This is Motion Pulse, though. Which I don't think. He has another one. Yet I don't know exactly where the thing is I'm looking for. Maybe I have to record one myself. Don't know about this. I swear I have cymbal rises somewhere. Maybe it's in immediate music? Where's immediate music at? What the fetch? Where'd they go? But I had immediate music on here. Guess I don't. So I'm completely blind. Huh. Well, I guess I'll have to record one myself. Well, not record, but grab one from my DAW. Just do it with my mouth. That's just as good, right? I want scoring, piano composition. Thank you. I don't think you guys are going to be able to hear anything in this program. I don't know why. I think it's... I don't know, you guys to hear any of that I'm doing right now? Do you guys hear me playing the piano? Do you hear the prelude music? I don't think so. I think I have a different audio driver for this program specifically. Just change the instrument on here. Let me do. I'm trying to remember how to use this. It's been so long. There's, I think, this. Yeah. Come up here and we tell it. Actually, I think it'll be easier for me to start a new track. Just remove the selected tracks and add a new instrument track. We want it to be Contact 5. Make the whole background music Mike's acapella versions. Why not? Why not? Okay, percussion. We want a low cymbal, maybe. One of these. There it is right there. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Let's get all the things on there. Chord. Oh, I don't remember which note I hit. Dang it. Okay. Oh yeah, it's different shortcuts for this program. Instead of plus and minus, it's G and H to zoom in and out. Start that right at the front. You guys don't hear anything that's going on right now, right? You're basically only hearing me. Because it would be super sick if you could hear what's in here. Maybe I could do some like music. It's actually one thing I was thinking about doing on the channel is doing my own arrangements of like classic video game music, my own reorchestrations, and having that be video content once in a while. And I could do that as streams for Patreon, me working on them. Yeah, I didn't think you could hear anything. Never mind. Scratch that idea. Okay, we're going to export this audio mix down. Wave format. We'll call it Symbol Rise. And we're going to put it. We're going to put it inside of the sound effects libraries because I just put it in there. Export. Okay. Now, I think I can close all that. Don't save. Okay, back to this. Crazy Chocobo. Alright, so what you weren't hearing was me finding this or creating this symbol rise. Wait, what the fetch? Oh, sound effects libraries. It's in here. Symbol rise. I want to try an analysis of Ocarina of Time's overworld theme. The randomness of it is very interesting to me. Yeah, it's super good. Now you can hear what I was doing. That was what I did in Cubase. Put it right here, right there.
Together and made something that feels truly inspired.
It's a little loud. Let's see what we can do with the. Okay, and lower this to maybe 12. Put this on there. Really build up to
that feels truly inspired. Feels truly inspired.
Yeah, not bad. Bring it up to maybe 10 decibels.
Thing that feels truly inspired.
Now, the choice is how long do we hold it?
And made something that feels truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the sands of
That could work. I mean, it depends on what I'm doing visually, I guess, so maybe I'll just wait to make that decision until then.
talent together and made something that feels truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's development was without its problem.
At the same time, I could also bring it in a lot quicker.
It's something that feels truly inspired. Now, this is
Like, maybe a little bit more than that, but that seems to be okay.
something that feels truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's development was without its problems, or that management didn't make a lot of mistakes along the way. To me, good management isn't about completely eliminating obstacles or having the perfect most of its strengths without highlighting its limitations. At first, the team started with a great title and core concept, the Sands of Time, unful of the game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together.
Seems like it might feel kind of cheap if I use this as a transition more than once.
Linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together.
It's also way too loud for this particular part.
Linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together.
Probably go all the way to like 21.
That tied the gameplay and the story together.
It just cuts too much. I need to fade it or something.
And the story together. And the story together. It tied the gameplay and the story together.
Oh, start talking again.
Tied the gameplay and the story together. As the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together. In a post-mortem written by Milan that tied the gameplay and the story together.
In a post, actually,
Game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together. In a post-mortem written by Milan in 2004,
that seems okay to me. I might just go down a little further just to make it seem...
identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together. In a post-mortem written by...
That feels more natural. What music will I pick for this part? Talking about post-mortem, this is where the problems of the development start coming in. So I think that prison one could work. This could possibly work here.
In a post-mortem written by Milan in 2004, he detailed the most in a post-mortem the story together. In a post-mortem written by Milan the gameplay and the story together. In a post
boom.
Tied the gameplay and the story together.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In a post
Still too early.
This feature ended up becoming a staple of the game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together.
1, 2, 3, 4, go. Oh, that seems like this worked.
This feature ended up becoming a staple of the game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together. In a post-mortem written by Milan in 2000,
That could work, or I could go on the second.
again. This feature ended up becoming a staple of the game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together.
1, 2, bam. Could start right there.
The player to rewind the time and try the sequence again. This feature ended up becoming a staple of the game's identity, and served as the linchpin that tied the gameplay and the story together. In a post-mortem written by Milan in 2004, he detailed the most difficult struggle.
I think I'm going to do it that way for now. Save.
Most difficult struggles the team faced. The first was the late arrival of Raphael Lacoste, the game's art director, who didn't join the team until late April 2002, more than 10 months after pre-production had already begun. Before he was hired, several prototypes had been made showing off the main character's moveset, alongside a few level design ingredients, but there was no art whatsoever to tie it all together. At that point, all the potential the game offered was demonstrated with simple blocks and monochrome textures. Impressive maybe from a technical standpoint, but certainly not pretty to look at. Mallah would go on to write, Raphael's first task was to define the artistic direction and style of the game and to develop all the necessary tools. Light maps were to be added to the engine at the 11th hour of pre-production, along with many other effects, volumetric fog, filter, glow, and so on. The most difficult challenge for the modelers was to keep a steady production pace for the maps while learning about upcoming and unfinished tools. As a matter of fact, the first final art wasn't available until the E3 2003 demo. Coming back from the show, the team saw the demo as the standard of quality that should be consistently present throughout the whole game. This seemed impossible considering just how much we still needed to produce. The demo was approximately 1/30th of the whole game, but the risk management output, including some scope reduction, and the tremendous efforts of our highly motivated team resulted in visual quality that surpassed that of the demo. Pre-production as a whole ended up taking a lot more time than the team had planned for. Their goal was to complete character behavior, macro designs, the storyline, and all tools before moving into level production, but with systems as complex as the ones they were devising, even minor tweaks to the prince's behaviors required major modifications. Mallah went on to write, all of this was good for the game's overall quality, but we had already lost precious production time designing, implementing, and rejecting several complete fight systems. On top of this, the team simply didn't have enough time to refine the generic AI supporting scripted events, which meant they had to craft the cooperative sequences where the prince and Pharaoh worked together case by case. Also, since Lacoste had been added to the team at the last minute, final maps didn't arrive until late in development. This meant that many of the enemies' behaviors had to be coded on placeholder maps, which did not account for geometry. As you might expect, this led to a significant debugging process down the line, and many enemy types, such as sand tigers, had to be cut altogether. Beyond this, because every aspect of the prince's moveset matches with the game's
Sounds good, Chris. See you in a little bit.
geography, the level design was minutely context sensitive, which meant that the team had to be sure their technical features behaved flawlessly. They also had to be sure that the rewind system was always functioning properly. Often, though, what they found was that enemies were forgetting their objectives, leading to broken gameplay where they no longer saw the player or attacked them, which meant the player could not progress past those sequences. So much could have been done in the earlier stages of development to prevent these problems. If only the maps and gameplay had been delivered in advance, a dedicated technical level designer could have foreseen all these issues and fixed them before alpha. Once again, we were not dealing with the problem in advance, a dedicated technical level designer could have foreseen all these issues and fixed them before alpha. Once again, we were not dealing with the problems in a strategic way. We were putting out fires as they occurred. Meanwhile, we were creating a mountain of bugs to deal with later. According to the post-mortem, that last statement was no exaggeration. It states that more than 14,000 bugs were discovered and fixed before launch. To help make headway on that process, 14 PlayStation 2 development kits were provided to the team, 4 of which were solely dedicated to QA testers with the task of recreating very rare crash bugs. One day, we realized that one of our testers was great at finding A bugs, the rare, nasty ones. She was able to find bugs no one else could. Initially, each developer who was assigned to her bugs got frustrated due to the time commitment in fixing them. Then we asked her to join the team, equipped her with a development kit, and with her working on the game.
I get so dang hungry for the full reviews listening to these. Well, it's one day at a time kind of a thing, right? We're getting there. I mean, like, once the music's down here, it's just going to be plugging in the video footage, and maybe another week or so of preparation, it'll be ready.
Game itself, we got our A-bugs curve back to normal. We replicated the model to up to 4 integrated testers within the team. This dramatically accelerated the pace of finding and fixing bugs, freeing some time for the developers to focus on the fixing side. Lastly, the way the engine was built also led to a number of setbacks and unnecessary frustration. Mala writes that game data was stored in one master file that contained everything for the developers to review: maps, models, AI, and the rest. Everything was centralized in this file except sound and videos. The situation didn't allow for multiple concurrent data access on the same file, at least without written permission. We soon realized our team had become too large to allow everyone access to the master files at the same time. We inherited a system that was designed with a small team in mind, but it didn't scale well to an army of 45 in crunch mode. Many problems occurred. Data was overwritten, the server crashed, files got corrupted. A lot of time was wasted because people had to wait for their turns to enter their changes on the network. Fortunately, a solution was found to this down the line, but a lot of time had been wasted because of it. By the time E3 2003 rolled around, completing the game at the standard of quality that had been set seemed impossible. Luckily, the team was such a tight-knit group with shared vision that morale stayed high even during a heavy crunch period. We were able to maintain the most effective form of communication: honesty. Speaking harshly about things that needed to be discussed wasn't a problem. We shared a common desire: the success of the project. No ego trip threatened the team's interest. Integration of newcomers could have disrupted this cohesion, but it didn't, because we didn't add large numbers to the team all at once. In addition, the game's scope was reduced at 2 key periods of development. The first came during Christmas of 2002, a time far enough away from release to delude the team a bit, who still believed they had plenty of time. However, ultimately the right decision was made, cutting an entire chapter taking place in a slave village. We accepted this decision because, in the end, everyone agreed it was the right move. If we had made this decision later, or worse, if we had refused to trim it, we would never have been able to finish the game on time. The second scope If we had made this decision later, or worse, if we had refused to trim it, we would never have been able to finish the game on time.
It's a good place to transition to a new piece of music.
Time. The second scope reduction came after.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it kind of was. They definitely they knew the things that were necessary. They knew the time limitations they had, and they only cut the things that, well, first of all, they knew they couldn't complete in time, but second, wouldn't hurt the overall package. And the game's paced really well because of it.
The second scope reduction came after E3 2003, where it became much more clear that they wouldn't have time to do everything they had planned. It meant that a lot of work they were proud of that they had.
This one could work.
The second scope reduction came after E3. The second scope reduction came after.
Let's see how we can make this more natural.
The second scope reduction.
Okay. I know, that's kind of how I feel too.
We would.
I think a lot of games feel unfocused now because they try to pack it with so much superfluous content instead of just the most important things.
Never have been able to finish the game on time.
2, 3, boom, boom. It's pretty close.
The second scope reduction
She feels great. It's a good transition.
was the right move. If we had made this decision later, or worse, if we had refused to trim it, we would never have been able to finish the game on time.
Maybe just a little more.
Been able to finish the game on time.
F. Dude, I'm selected on this one only.
Been able to finish the game on time.
If I do one of these, go to like -9 or something.
Trim it, we would never have been able to finish the game on time.
This would also need to be louder.
Been able to finish the game on time.
And I think we'll do this instead. Do a 20. Nope, that's not going to work. Fail. Ah, come on.
Finish the game on time.
Something closer like that.
Game on time. The second scope reduction came. Been able to finish the game on time. The second scope reduction came after.
I need to count it out. Count out the beats.
Game on time.
2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. A little later.
To finish the game on time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
This.
I think the time signature is not 4/4 on this piece.
Been able to finish the game on time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3.
This.
That's close.
We would never have been able to finish the game on time.
2, 3, 4, 2, 3.
This.
Just a frame back or something. Then you Drag this out all the way to the beginning.
We would never have been able to finish the game on time. The second scope reduction came after E3 2003, where it became much more clear that they wouldn't have time to do everything they had planned. It meant that a lot of work they were proud of, that they had spent a lot of time on, would be lost. Ultimately, though, it was the price that had to be paid to deliver a satisfying experience in time for release. And to be honest, I think the game is better for it. Of course, I can't say that for sure. I don't know what was cut or how.
Too much here. Come back.
I think the game is better for it. Of course, I
Whoops, that's not the part.
experience in time for release. And to be honest, paid to deliver a satisfying experience in time for release. And to be honest, I think the game is better for it. Of course, I can't say that for sure. I don't know what was cut or how it would have flowed had they had time to include everything they had been planning. What I do know is this: Sands of Time is perfectly paced as it is. There's a flow to it that feels so fine-tuned and natural that I can't imagine adding to it would make the experience any better. For those who have watched my channel for a while, you'll know that I actually prefer shorter games. I'd rather play a 20-hour RPG like Chrono Trigger or Suikoden 1, games that are laser-focused and contain zero filler, than a 100-hour RPG full of extraneous busy work and padded side content. Sands of Time can be finished in less than 8 hours, but every area, every combat encounter, every puzzle, and every sequence of the story feels like it's paramount to the experience and never wears out its welcome. To me, fluidity, pace, and a high standard of execution in the presentation always trumps an excess of content. In other words, quality over quantity, and in Prince of Persia's case, the game contains only the highest quality content. As stated earlier, the gameplay of Sands of Time boils down to 3 core features: acrobatics, combat, and rewind. And perhaps the most lauded of these is the first, with its fluid movement worked so brilliantly into the well-designed platforming and exploration. It has a very ninja-like feel to it, incorporating wall running, climbing, and even gymnastics-like parkour. All of this is incredibly responsive, and one of my favorite things about playing the game as I was growing up was mastering the movement to the point where I could fly through these platforming sections at high speeds, which just feels so satisfying. Once the prince obtains the Dagger of Time in the story, you'll also be able to rewind time up to 10 seconds when you make a mistake, keeping the player's momentum, like the prince's, moving forward at all times. This power is limited by the number of sand tanks you currently have, and each time you use the rewind power, it depletes one of the tanks. Ultimately, you can unlock up to 10 tanks by exploring every nook and cranny to find all the upgrades, which will provide more opportunities to rewind and undo your missteps and miscalculations. The combat, while not as highly praised as the platforming, is still more than competent and ultimately a lot of fun. My favorite part about it is how every new combat scenario is set up to continually challenge the player, teaching them the skills they need in order to master the mechanics and avoid complacency, where they might adopt the habit of relying on the same tactics over and over again. For instance, some enemies will allow you to grapple and jump over them for an aerial slice, one of the safest and most effective moves in the game, but many others counter this move and will force the player into different tactics. The way the game mixes up enemy types to continually keep you on your feet and vary your attack patterns throughout each encounter creates a system for combat that, while simple, is consistently challenging even with a small number of enemy types and a limited moveset. Enemies can't be killed unless you finish them off with the Dagger of Time, which absorbs the sands of time that the monsters are made from and effectively kills them for good. It's not always easy to pull this off though, as enemy AI seems to always know exactly when you want to go in for a kill and will ambush and swipe at you just when you think it's safe to try and finish an enemy off. Learning when to defend yourself and when to move in for an attack is a skill you'll need to develop quickly, otherwise you're going to find yourself taking a pounding. Mallah put it this way: enemies represent particular level design ingredients, being extremely taking a pounding. Mallah put it this way: Enemies represent particular level design ingredients. Being extremely dynamic, they need to complement the main character's combat skills. At the same time, they should also increasingly challenge the player's combat skills. At the same time, they should also increasingly challenge the players and surprise them with unexpected behaviors in any given situation. We also used specific enemies as tools to teach the player how to fight better, an instrumental aid in the player's learning process. To this end, the developers did a fantastic job, and I can think of a number of fights off the top of my head that still challenge me to this day, even though I've beaten the game over a dozen times. It's true that the combat can feel a bit limited at times, and escorting Farah through some of these sequences can be frustrating for obvious reasons, problems which were addressed really well in the sequel, but overall the combat still feels really good. I love the way they incorporated the prince's acrobatics into the fights, allowing you to lunge off of walls, dodge roll, I love the way they incorporated the prince's acrobatics into the fight. Incorporated the prince's acrobatics into the fights, allowing prince's acrobatics in limited at times, and escorting Farah through some of these sequences can be frustrating for obvious reasons, problems which were addressed really well in the sequel, but overall the combat still feels really good. I love the way they incorporated the prince's acrobatics into the fights.
Okay, I think I went too far with it.
Acrobatics.
Hard to tell.
Prince's acrobatics into the fights, allowing you to
Probably turn this off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Ooh, that's close. I think it's just like a frame too late. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4, go. Again, maybe just one frame. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's good. Just do a little bit of a constant gain on that. Make it a little smoother. Ooh, that actually made it worse. I think what I need to do is go this way with it, not that way. Maybe even like another frames. Because I think they have a symbol. I need to like let the symbol. Yeah, it's good.
even though I've beaten the game over a dozen times. It's true that the combat can feel a bit limited at times, and escorting Farah through some of these sequences can be frustrating for obvious reasons, problems which were addressed really well in the sequel, but overall the combat still feels really good. I love the way they incorporated the prince's acrobatics into the fights, allowing you to lunge off of walls, dodge roll, and flip through the air for stylish finishes. There are also certain time powers that can be put to use to give the player an advantage in tight spots. Freezing enemies when surrounded to allow you to focus on one at a time, or even freezing all of them, allowing the prince to zoom around and quickly kill them in a flurry. These powers are tied to power tanks on the left side of the user interface under the health bar and on the right side of the sand tanks, these white semicircles you see here. And each time you use one of your powers, it will deplete one of the power tanks. In order to use the power of haste, which allows you to freeze time and zoom around in a flurry, you must have all the power tanks filled, and the only way to replenish them is by taking out monsters with your dagger and retrieving sand. Ultimately, where I feel the game is most successful, though, is in its planning and management. In most games I've played, at some point, the gameplay becomes monotonous because the developers don't do a good enough job mixing up its various features in a way that keeps the experience feeling fresh. Whether it's too much combat, too much dialogue, or too much time traveling without something interesting happening, lots of games that have great ideas in place can still become boring to play if the devs don't have a good feel for pacing. Prince of Persia, perhaps of all the games I've ever played, is masterfully arranged and organized on that front. You never feel like you're doing one thing for too long. No sequence of the game feels like it overstays its welcome. In basically every case, just after completing a tough combat sequence, you'll have exactly the right amount of time dedicated to platforming and navigating through traps, then you'll have a great puzzle sequence that never feels too abstruse, then you'll have charming storytelling that gives you the motivation to continue moving forward without dominating the player's time with exposition-laden dialogue or cutscenes you end up wanting to skip. It's all so tight and well-balanced that the game never feels like it's dragging, and always presents you with a new challenge that makes the experience exciting from beginning to end. There's no fluff, no padding, and nothing that feels like it wasn't needed or doesn't belong. To me, this speaks to first-rate game direction and management, and not once in my many, many playthroughs of this game have I arrived at a section that I wished I could just skip past. All of it is engaging, all of it is satisfying, and all of it feels handcrafted and purposeful. It's masterful game design. The story, while short and simple, is also presented in such a charming way as to elevate it high above what the sum of its parts gives you on paper. The basic
I'm actually really not sure what I should do for this part. I think this one could work of all the fight ones.
Masterful game design. The story. Masterful game design. The story, while short. The story, while short and simple, is also presented in such a charming. The story, while short and simple, is also presented in such a charming way as to elevate it high above what the sum of its parts gives you on paper. The basic premise has the prince accompanying his father, King Shahraman, as they sack and loot the palace of a Maharaja in India while en route to meet the Sultan of Azad. Being enticed by the traitorous vizier of the Maharaja, the Persians can't resist the opportunity for honor and glory, and with the vizier's help, enter the palace and steal the hourglass which contains the fabled sands of time. The Maharaja's daughter, Farah, is taken prisoner amidst the chaos, and later, once the army arrives in Azad, the prince is tricked into unleashing the sands by the vizier, who seeks to use its power to obtain eternal life for himself. In doing so, all of the people in the castle are transformed into vicious sand creatures, all those except the prince, the vizier, and Farah, who are protected by special relics. Thus, the prince sets off with Farah's help to reach the top of the highest tower of the Palace of Azad, where the vizier is keeping the hourglass, to undo his terrible mistake. While the story might not sound like anything special when broken down like that, the decision to have the prince narrate the story as if he's retelling the events afterward is such a brilliant move, not only because it puts a seal on that classic adventure feel that is integral to the series' identity, but also gives room for some of the most charismatic, fourth-wall-breaking interactions I've ever seen in games. Anytime you save the game, the prince will ask you if you'd like him to start the story from that point next time you're interrupted. When you exit the game, he asks if you really want to stop him before he finishes telling the story. And when you die, he'll say things like this.
Actually, cut it.
All of this, in combination with tightly written scenes and he'll say things like this.
No. That isn't how it happened. Let me tell it again.
He'll say things like this. Like this. All of this, in combination with tightly written scenes and amazing chemistry between the prince and Farah, leads to countless moments of wit and charm that really tie together all the gameplay concepts and deliver a story that is both unforgettable and every bit as timeless and exciting as the classics it was inspired by. I also think the prince goes through an excellent personal arc, where he starts the game off as an arrogant, chauvinistic, dismissive noble, but by the end is humbled by his many losses and learns to care for more than just his own glory. All in all, it's a fun story that is excellently told, and in many ways overachieves on its premise. The soundtrack is also achieves on its premise.
Right there.
It overachieves on its premise. In many ways, overachieves on its premise.
Go up to 0 on that.
Achieves on its premise.
For the ending. And grab our symbol again. Put it down here.
That is excellently told, and in many ways overachieves on its premise.
And let's put that at 0.
Overachieves on its premise.
Maybe -6.
Told, and in many ways overachieves on its premise. 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 The soundtrack is also solid, incorporating classical Middle Eastern influences with subtle and understated rock accompaniment. It was composed by Stuart Chatwood, best known for his work as the bassist in...
Okay, you shut your mouth for a second. The final chord sounds a little bit like a Saturday morning cartoon that's about to go to commercial.
Achieves on its premise.
That should come a little earlier.
Its premise. Achieves on its premise.
That's a little too soon.
The soundtrack is also solid.
Hold on. It's right there. Right here needs to go down. Up here needs to be like at 0 or whatever. And then gain on that MFR. Okay, I need to make that less crazy. This can be maybe negative 4.5 or something.
The soundtrack is also solid, incorporating classical Middle Eastern influences.
No! 25, you fetcher.
The soundtrack is also solid, incorporating classical Middle Eastern influences with subtle and understated rock accompaniment. It was composed by Stuart Chatwood, best known for his work as the bassist and keyboard player of The Tea Party, a rock band based in Ontario, Canada. The Tea Party became renowned for the way they fused Western and Eastern musical styles.
It's just a touch too loud.
Soundtrack is also solid, incorporating classical Middle Eastern influences with subtle and understated rock accompaniment. It was composed by Stuart Chatwood, best known for his work as the bassist and keyboard player of The Tea Party, a rock band based in Ontario, Canada. The Tea Party became renowned for the way they fused Western and Eastern musical styles, so Chatwood was a natural fit to do the same in creating the feel for the soundtrack of The Sands of Time. Despite his previous experience, Chatwood still took a great deal of time researching and expanding his world music library, and did as much listening to Radio Darvish as he could. Still, due to the lack of high-quality world music sample libraries, he had to augment what was available with his own recordings, and brought in vocalist Mariam Talar to cement that authentic Persian sound. Unlike its sequel, Warrior Within, which leaned far too heavily on the edgy, heavy metal side, something I might get into in a future video, Chatwood did an excellent job here of blending rock into the more ethnic sound that fits the tone of classic adventure so well, which brings with it the appropriate tension when necessary without betraying the series' tone. It's a very short track list with only 14 total tracks, most of which are higher intensity battle pieces, but it's also a fairly short game, and the sound is wonderful, being high energy and tense when it needs to be, but also knowing when to pull back. Prince of Persia has been one of my tense when it needs to be, but also knowing when to pull back.
Bring it to like -9 or something.
Energy and tense when it needs to be, but also knowing when to pull back. Prince of Persia has been one of my top 10 games since I first played it, and I can confidently say that it stands the test of time. It has revolutionary platforming and animation quality, great, if simple, combat mechanics, and a rewind feature that makes it stand out from any of its contemporaries. What really makes it special, though, is its strong direction, which balances every section of the game and creates a perfectly paced and engaging gameplay loop, something I find rare even in my favorite games. In my opinion, this was due to strong management decisions in tandem with the creative cooperation of the series' creator, who brought together an incredibly fluid and charming overall package. There's really not much more I can say about it than that. If you haven't played it, I strongly recommend picking it up.
Actually, I feel like I should pretty much just...
I strongly recommend picking it up.
Like right there.
Recommend picking it up. If you haven't played it, I strongly recommend picking it up.
Okay, let's at least put in the intro resin arc animation while we're here. Logo animations. This one. Not that one. It is this one. That is the one.
Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared from the mainstream. Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared. Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands.
Push this over a little.
Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands. Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared from the main.
Just gonna put that at 0.
Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared from the mainstream AAA industry. The once thriving linear action-adventure puzzle platform genre has Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared from the main.
Still think pushed over a little bit.
Games like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time have all but disappeared from the mainstream AAA industry. The once thriving thing that feels truly inspired. That feels truly inspired. Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's Now, this isn't to say that the Sands of Time's development was without its problems, or that management didn't make a lot of mistakes along the way.
Okay, I want to put in the final one as well, but I think I'm going to start changing my call to action page at the end from the Patreon call out to a subscribe call out. After Effects is what I'm looking for. That would be something I'll have to locate again. This can be ejected. I don't need this anymore. Get that out of here. Okay. Here, resonant arc. New branding probably. Huh. Maybe it's in logo. Maybe it's in. Where did I? Oh, wait a minute. I think I know where it's at. It's in here, actually. Quotes. Thumbnails. I think it's this one. And the annotations card, yes. So I'm going to do that up for a second. Actually, the support on Patreon. Let's duplicate that. Turn one of them off. Delete all the blue. No, actually, keep the blue. Just change it to subscribe. Probably size it up a little bit. Less midway between here and there. And then bring in our logo. What am I doing here? It's an arc. New branding. Put this here. Scale it way down. About that size. Put it. It's pretty much the center. And then we'll mask from the center out. So we get the same borders. This thing. Something like that. There you have it. Subscribe. I'll take the word subscribe. Change the color to something in this range. to shrink it down a little bit. Move it over a bit so that it's closer to the side. Cool. I got a subscribe screen. Some YouTubers scroll the names of their patrons at the end of their videos. Would that be something easy to do or not really? It wouldn't be hard to do. It depends on if you're talking about listing all the subscribers or if it's just one of the tiers, like the higher tiers. Because, like, we have like 160 something people. So, you know, it would take time to compile an entire list, especially if we re-announce it and we, you know, sign up another 100 people or something. It can take some time, but if it's a one-time thing and it's done and you just scroll the same thing, well, you can't really do that because you have to update it every time there's new patrons. I don't know. Could be a hassle. I'm not sure though. I've never thinking about it. It would be the same as like doing credits on one of the films I've done, but just compiling a list of names that large can take time. Don't want to do it as a JPEG. I think I want to do it as PNG. There we go. Subscribe screen. New branding. Let's just put it in there. Subscribe annotation page. Thank you. Save. At the same time, while I'm here, I will put the new logo. Where did it go? Guess I'll copy it from here. Paste it into there. Position. Copy and paste. Scale it up. I said scale. Redo that. Scale. Thank you. All the way up to about there. And I will add that to render queue. As a do this one as a JPEG sequence. We'll call this subscribe icon for YouTube annotations. Annotation page. Okay. Save. Branding. There we go. All right, first, actually, we want to make sure it's exactly 20 seconds long. Frame size. Grab it. Plop it over there.
Played it, I strongly recommend picking it up.
just cuts. Good enough. Okay, I think that's all I'm doing for today. Dude, my guy is typing something, so I'll wait for that. But I think the music selection's pretty good. I think we're all set. Just need to start laying down the video, which I will start on Monday. I'm going to bring back Final Fantasy Friday tomorrow, so no stream tomorrow, no stream this weekend, but I'll be back again on Monday for sure. Otherwise, I think we're good for now. The guy stopped typing. He was typing something. Guy, what did you want to say? In any case, go ahead and write it out. I'll respond to it in Discord. Thanks for watching. Peace out.